Okay, it's a little engine repair thing, and it delves into some other stuff too, but we're all gonna benefit from this, so, bear with me on that. There's 3 unbreakable laws of thermodynamics that work on our vehicles and everything else. The laws of thermodynamics. The law of conservation of energy states, that's the first law, energy cannot be created or destroyed in an isolated system.
That's true.
You can trade matter for energy, you know about that. The second law states that the entropy of any isolated system always increases. And the third law states that the entropy of a system approaches a constant value as the temperature approaches absolute zero. So, now, the way this thing works is that if you burn wood, and I think that other slide either got bumped out of there or something. Anyway, if you burn wood, you get heat. When you heat something up, eventually the wood burns up, and then whatever you heat it up cools off. Right? Okay, so if you take energy to make order from disorder, you see, you can also, for wood, you can also cut up a bunch of trees, and you can build something out of them, right? In other words, you put it all together, you build it up. But you drive by the road, you see these houses sitting out there that have been sitting there a while, and people haven't been keeping them up, they're falling apart, right? You park a car in the woods for 20 years. Is it going to start when you go back? The battery's going to go bad, the tires are going to go flat. The reason that the tires are unsafe after 6 years is because of entropy. Everything comes apart. Stuff doesn't get better by itself, right? And if you start a bicycle wheel turning, it takes energy to do that. You let go, it slows down, it stops. That's entropy, the whole thing, right? So anyway, this was in 2009, and in that year, even though we had frost-covered cars some April mornings in Alabama, and it snowed in North Dakota in June that year, the summer had been plenty warm enough to fill up these service bays with temperature-related problems. You know, you got these things that are running hot. The Dodge Stratus came to us, you might recognize that one, with 3 primary concerns: heat and tackle the malfunction indicator lamp. That was one of 2 vehicles that week that threw us a PO128 code. The PO128 code is telling you that it's running a little too cold to be efficient in closed loop. All right, the temperature was below thermostat regulating temperature. So the engine controller knows how warm it's supposed to be running if everything's right. If it's running too cool, it's going to toss you that. There's also a PO125 code, which means it's even doing worse. Like if it's got no thermostat in it, or the thermostat has done something like this. That's come completely apart. All right, the thermostat was really accessible on the Stratus. You just, pop the little filler off, and there it is. It's pretty easy to get to. Nice hot replacement thermostat warmed it up. Well, the pitfalls of 128 and 125 is the PCM can't control emissions worth a doggone unless the engine's running about 200 degrees. So you want the engine to be running right up in the middle, about 200. Now we got this mysterious Ford Ranger that belongs to the electronic instructor's dad, and it's like a 2000 model. And this old guy was doing some kind of work where he had to keep a logbook on that thing. The truck still runs good, but it's got no cabin heat, right? And he kept the log on it, and it's got 980,000 miles on it.
What?
Yep, still cooking and booking. That little white Ranger belongs to, old Mr. Teal. But the point is, he got no cabin heat. So, thermostat, water pump. We can actually, we hook our clear hose up, and there's water trying to go through the heater core and all. Heater core not stopped up, but he's got no cabin heat. And the engine runs really cold all the time too. And the only way you can warm the engine up on that one is to put something in front of the radiator to block the airflow, and then it'll start to heat up. In the cold winter time, he's got no cabin heat worth a toot. Well, if you look online, there's all kinds of these vehicles that got that same engine in them, and that are doing stupid stuff like that. They can't get no cabin heat. How does the engine not make heat, man? Anyway, that's a mystery there. But the PCV system helped prevent sludge formation by removing moisture-laden blow-by from the crankcase. You seen sludge like that? You seen that sludge? You don't want the sludge, right? I told my wife, whenever you fire up your vehicle, make sure you're going to warm it up before you turn it off. Don't crank it up, move to the other side of the yard and switch it off 10 times every week, or you're gonna wind up with this. Because it's gotta get warm enough for that PCV system to steam that moisture out. Like, the moisture actually can be processed like that, but whenever that water that you're making when you're burning the gas, you're making a gallon of water for every gallon of gas you burn, some of that's gonna go blow by the rings, you're gonna have moisture in the crankcase, and it's gonna mix with that oil, it's gonna make sludge, and that sludge is horrible. And like I say, some of these dealerships won't even de-sludge an engine, they'll just go ahead and just replace the motor. You know, because by the time you get your labor done and all that stuff to get all that sludge out of there, and it's a messy business anyway, right? Now, I remember a time when the cooling system thermostat was a lot more prone to be a cause of overheating problem. I had this one guy I got in an argument with at Sambo's when I used to go there and eat a hamburger all the time, and I was doing mechanic work then, and had been for years. And he was telling me, if you take the thermostat out of a car, it'll overheat. Really?
No.
And he was just absolutely adamant about that. But here, I will tell you this, on some of the older mid-60s model cars, the radiators were really small, and if you took a thermostat on, it would go through the radiator too fast to get rid of any heat. So one car out of 500 might overheat if you take the thermostat out. But all of them would, the giant number of them will run too cold. I mean, just stone cold. And so that's flip-flop though. Back in the day, and we've seen them here, where we had one that was running hot, and basically the engine would get warmer and warmer and warmer, and the thermostat, the hose would stay cold. You can look at it with FLRI camera, you know, forward-looking infrared, whatever, and then you pull the thing out, put it in the can, heat it up, boiling. I've actually heated them up to where the water was boiling, and it would not open that thermostat. Seen that before. But that doesn't usually happen. Like most of the time, it's running too cold. Now, when I was at the Ford dealership, sometimes we'd get thermostats. I'd have to get 3 of them from the parts pipeline before I got one that would open. One that would not run too cold. And if it's running 160 degrees, that's too cold. Interesting thing, I had one of the Crown Vics over here. I was doing a vehicle inspection one time when there was nobody here but me. And I pulled it in here, and I had the wireless vehicle interface hooked up, that needs diagnostic stuff. And I had pulled up just the engine coolant on the screen, and it was sitting on 160 degrees. It wouldn't get above that. I said, well, this needs a thermostat. Well, you know how easy it is to change a thermostat on a Crown Victoria. You can change it in 5 minutes. You know, zing, zing, zing. I had one on my desk that was in a box, you know, just for that purpose. And so while the engine was still 160 degrees, it didn't have any pressure on it. I pulled the hose out, dropped that other thermostat in, put an O-ring on it, put it back on, cranked it up, and immediately went up to 195. It's amazing to me how fast, just because I had a new thermostat in there, they went up. It just really shocked me. I didn't expect it to happen that quick. Anyway, a thermostat can look just fine and still open too soon. I don't know what goes wrong with them. You can pull one out that's running too cold, and it may look as good as this. Unless the spring gets weak and loses its temper, the inside there is a wax element. And as that wax expands, it opens it up. You see a lot of these Asian cars have got a wax element in their idle control. They got water going through their idle air control. And they'll basically let hot water go through there and work on it. And those things cost, you know, $500–600 if you had to buy one. Dr. Rydell had to have one for his Miata. And it was like $500 or something like that. Well, the electric ones, they're about $50. You know, why they do that? I don't know. You know. All right, the next order of business on the Stratus was to diagnose the HVAC system. The air conditioner wasn't working, blowing hot. So we identified the refrigerant, the 100% R134, and connected the machine and found out the pressures were really low across the board. Now, we had the normal amount of refrigerant in it. We actually pulled it out and put back what was supposed to be in there. And with it running, and the compressor running and all this, we had this, see how low that is? And we had that, and it was really low. Does anybody remember what that means? You've been through AC. If the high and low side are both low?
Compression.
No, that one there will be both. I mean, I see where you're going with that, but usually if it's the compressor, they'll both be about the same pressure. See what I mean? Because it's supposed to pull them. That's an expansion valve. Now, one time on a Toyota, we had an expansion valve we replaced for that, and it stayed like that until we put an evaporator on it. And I never could tell that the evaporator was clogged or anything. But time for an expansion valve, we put one of those on there. Now this one here is the kind like most cars have on it now. They got a block type expansion valve. There is another kind that looks different from this, which you'll see like on your vans that have rear air on them. They'll have an expansion valve on the back, but they've got an orifice on the front. But a lot of them are going back to expansion valves now. Back in the You ever looked under the hood of Dr. Ryle, Cadillac? Dr. Ryle? It's got a suction throttling valve on it, which is a different, you know, it's a big, about this long, and it's in the suction line. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, they're all about keeping the evaporator from freezing up, but you have to have this orifice here so that that liquid refrigerant that's coming from the condenser can go into the evaporator as a low pressure liquid, and it can evaporate and absorb heat. So when something's evaporated, it absorbs heat. Okay, so while we checked the exhaust smell, it had exhaust smell too. It was smelling exhaust. And it didn't take long to find the exhaust system. Now what we like to do now is pump smoke. We put a smoke, little cone in there from the smoke machine that we use for evap systems. Pump that thing full of smoke and watch the smoke, wherever smoke spurts out, where your leak is. You can find all kind of exhaust leaks like that, works real good. But what we found that over there. I have seen people pour something down the, pour oil in the intake and let it smoke up and see where the smoke comes. You can do it that way too. But the exhaust system from the cat on back was really sound. The flexible coupling had to be replaced. The torque angle changes. Now, when you got a front wheel drive car, or even rear wheel drive car, front wheel drive car worse. Front wheel drive car, the engine is constantly doing this. And you can't have just a stiff pipe going up there because it's going to break off. So you got to have something to take that, right? Now, on some of the Tempos, it had a big old graphite round shaped gasket, about that big around, and it had a big pipe, and it would twist in there like that. That graphite gasket would twist in there, sort of almost like a ball, but it was, of exhaust could flow through it. This one here had broke inside this thing, and if you see this. This stuff right here inside, the flexible part of that pipe inside this right here will crack, break. And that thing keeps it together sort of when it breaks. Now this Montana, we ran into an issue with this one. Came in with an illuminated mill, and beyond that, the HVAC blower that would sometimes just quit blowing. And the owner found out somehow she could slap the panel up under the dash on the right side, and the blower would wake up and blow for a little while. This is usually a blower motor or resistor connector issue, and this one here, it was a blower connector. And usually the blower will need replacing too when you run into a situation like this. You might also notice that one there looks like that thing had lost its tension. See how that one's good and tight, flying on the pin, and the other one's not? And the heat had kind of worked on it. Now, I have actually took my little pick tool and tweaked some of those, and then run something in there to sand them, to get all this oxidation off, and work on the pins on the inside, tighten them up really good, put some silicone dielectric grease on them, plug them in, they may last a while like that. You know what silicone dielectric grease is for? This white grease that we put in spark plug wires? Why do we put that in spark plug wires?
Doesn't it like prevent corrosion or something?
Well, sort of, but it does more than that. A lot of the time, you know how the spark plug wire, the old spark plug wire, not the new ones with the coil package just slides on there. The old spark plug wire snapped onto the head of that spark plug, right? Okay, so it just snaps onto the head of the spark plug. Every time that spark goes through there, it's going to make little lightning bolts in there. And those little lightning bolts are going to create radio frequency interference. There was a girl one time that came over here with a little S10 with a 4.3 in it. And on that S10, she had radio noise. When she give it a gas, just awful. I mean, it just all of a sudden started happening. Okay, so how do you find that? Radio noise.
Radio.
Yeah, listen to the radio. And the engine wasn't running, you didn't hear it. Engine running. So it's just a horrible whining noise on the radio.
Mine does that usually.
Huh?
Mine does that sometimes.
Like the power supply is too high. Sometimes it just gets too much power from the.
Well, what we found on that one, there's two different things. The alternator can cause it. But what you do on that is you unplug the alternator and see if it stops doing it. If it doesn't stop doing it, then you're looking for an ignition system issue. And this one here, see that little carbon button in there that the rotor rides on top of? Now, this is not the cap. I've got the cap somewhere. I was going to show that to you, but could I find it? No. Wait a minute. Maybe right over here. No, that's not it either. Doggone it. Anyway, I used to be able to put my hand right on that thing. Anyway, that little carbon button fell out of that thing. And so every time the coil fired, it would have to jump about that far. And you got a naked spark, you're gonna have radio frequency interference. Now the dielectric grease, what it does is not only does it keep the boots from vulcanizing to the spark plug. You know these GM spark plugs that don't even have these little ridges on them, that are just smooth? Don't you hate those suckers? Because you just about got to destroy it. Now they made a little thing that you could put in there with a blower, and I made one time, that you flatten out a piece of tube and stick it in there and put it into a blower, and you blow air down it, poof, it pop it loose till you pull it off there. You know, I used to do that when I was at the Ford place. You know, some of those Thunderbird Super Coupes and all that kind of stuff, you couldn't even probably get a finger on a spark plug wire. You know, those things would be welded on there like, and you had to figure out all kinds of stuff, and you could, you know, do like Tim and take your tool, you know, like this right here. All right. So anyway, I tell that one guy that was asking about that, I said, you put this dielectric grease on there and it fills in all those gaps. It's supposed to. And it actually discourages any sparks from jumping, you know, from little lightning from happening right here on the tip of the plug. And that does away with the radio frequency interference. That's what the deal is on that. And so that's one of the reasons we use that. Well, it also prevents oxidation because it seals it. My F-150, when it rained, was leaking water around the high mount stoplight inside the truck. I was noticing I'd have condensation on the inside of the windshield. And then I found out that's where it's coming from, so I took that off and I got silicone dielectric grease and smeared all over the gasket. Put it back on there and it hadn't leaked since. It repels moisture too, so it's a good thing to use, right? Lithium grease absorbs moisture. I don't know why anybody uses that on boat, trailer, wheel bearings, but they do, you know. Anyway. Now it's interesting what people do just to get through their day. I heard of one woman that found out when her car wouldn't respond. Which one of these European cars has the key here in the console? You remember seeing those? Volvo or who's that?
Yeah, Volvo.
Yeah, some of them.
Volvo and Renault has like this chip thing, put in the middle.
Yeah.
It's not a key, it's like a chip, like a card.
Yeah.
You put it in the middle console and they can start it with a button.
Well, that particular one was just a key
Yeah,
down there.
I think
And
it's
some
a
of the
Volvo.
older ones, yeah. And she said that it wouldn't start unless she poured some water down there. And so she always kept some water and she'd pour some down there every time she started, and it always worked for her. And she was asking click and clack, you know, those guys, the Tappet brothers, you know, I've heard those guys, they was asking those about it. I thought that was the weirdest thing. But this is what people will do to get by. They slap this, they do that, they pump the gas, they do whatever they have to do. Their people are adaptable, you know what I mean? You kept some water on hand for months and poured a little bit of Lux on it where it needed. Well, we took in this 97 Honda Civic on it about the same time with this lackluster AC performance. Found a blend of 134 and R12. Can't pull that into your machine. That's why we put our refrigerant identifier on every car that we do AC work on, unless we were the last ones that worked on it, right? So what you do is, if you pull a mixture of R134A and R12 into the machine, you're making a mess in everybody else's car. So all of a sudden you pull it into your machine, the next car you work on, you're putting that stuff back in their car, and the next one you work on, you're putting it back in their car, and now you got 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 cars with a blend that you pulled into your machine. So we do this, and if it's got a blend, you use the tank with this gray with a yellow top and a special, you know, evacuator we got that's for that reason. I got it back in there, you've seen it probably. All right, we refilled it with good clean charge, and we discovered the head pressure was shoving the high pressure switch open, 400 PSI, and caused the AC clutch to machine gun in and out. So when the head pressure would go up, the high pressure switch would make it cut off and on. It would only do this when it was sitting still. So that pointed to a condenser fan issue. I don't know if some of y'all might remember that little black Nissan that we had in here that Chancey had, and the AC would start, you know, after you run it a while, it would cool good, but sitting there it would start slipping the belt. Remember that? And what we replaced on that to get rid of that problem was her little fan clutch, because she actually we could put a fan in front of the radiator, and with that fan blowing through the radiator, it never started slipping the belt. So we knew that it was an airflow problem across the condenser, and it wasn't stopped up at dog fennels or anything. It was just, you know, so we put a clutch on there and it cleared it right up. And I've got a YouTube video on that somewhere that's a little short one. Well, the condenser fan had melted his fuse. This is where the fuse came from. See how it's kind of cooked on there? Got these little bitty fuse carrying all those amps. That's not a good idea. You know what I mean? That's why, you know, typically for a lot of amperage, you'll have these big maxi fuses. And you notice how hard the fuses are to get out of there, and they make those terminals be really, really tight. But these things right here, over time, they start to melt a little bit, and the Honda, would, basically the cooling fan out here was not even, working on this. So, okay, we actually were able to, work with those terminals, put a fresh fuse back in there, and all that. Now, occasionally, I'll tell you something else that's smart to do. You need to actually measure how much current the cooling fan is pulling. Because occasionally a cooling fan, if it starts to, if the cooling fan is stinking and all, the windings will get all messed up. One time, a long time ago, this lady that I knew had this 86 Oldsmobile with throttle body injection. And she was driving it, and she crossed the traffic circle over there. And she said, whenever I crossed the traffic circle, my engine died. And she said, when I crank it up, it just goes right back dead. Now, this was in the summertime. And so I said, all right, let me see if I can get off a little bit, let's see what I got. So I opened the hood, and a little four-cylinder in it with a throttle body injection on it. And I said, okay, it was an 86 Oldsmobile station wagon. And I said, start it up. And she started up, and it went dead. And after it went dead, the injector was going, after it died, the injector was going, it's still buzzing up a storm. What the heck is this about, And so as she stood, the key was still on, but the engine was dead, the injector was buzzing away. I started smelling something. I remember yesterday I said if you smell something burnt, you need to go find out what it is. Well, I saw smoke coming out of the cooling fan. Okay, so I unplugged the cooling fan, and the buzzing stopped. I said, start it up. She started up and it ran just fine. Had the air conditioner on, which turns on the condenser fan, plugged the condenser fan back in. The condenser fan started running, but it was getting hot and smoking, and it was creating waves of electromagnetic RFI that was just fooling the engine controller because it was getting all kinds of renegade signals from that bad fan, because all that, it just, if you could look at pictures of it, you'd see all this stuff going out there. So RFI is a serious problem. A lot of times on the rotor in a distributor, we would put that for the same reason. And you see a rotor, like that little Pathfinder distributor had a little, the one that you put in, that rotor had a little yellow plastic coating on it, it looked like on the very tip. That was for the same reason. But anyway. All right, the Montana, there was another one. It threw a PL128 code, the second one of those we've seen in as many days. And anybody put on a 3.4 in one of these, you ever put maybe like in that Pontiac we got out there, you ever put a thermostat in one of those? If you look at where the thermostat is, you're thinking, oh crap, I gotta pull half the motor apart to get this thing out of here. Because where it is, you see this exhaust crossover right here, that hot pipe that comes over from the front to the back, which is sort of a crazy way to do that. Instead of going under the car, they went over the top, behind the little transmission housing. And the thermostat is right in here. And when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, no way that's coming out of there. And even if you look in the shop manual, a lot of times they'll say you gotta pull that exhaust off to get the thermostat. Actually, you don't. But this particular one, the bottom hole was slotted. You can just loosen it up, pull it out of there, and put the thermostat back in there. A little bit aggravating, the one behind the exhaust crossover, but you don't have to pull the exhaust to replace it. And it kind of looks like that right there. The one that's got the rubber ring on it? All right, it's got a rubber slotted gasket, but it turned out to be something aggravating. The manifold nest for the thermostat is vertically oriented, and it's got a machined inset. You know how they get the whole thing machined in there? Here's something else you need to remember too. If you're putting a thermostat in that's like on a 302 Ford or something, and the little machined in part where the thermostat sits up in there is in the well, wherever it's at, if it's in the thermostat housing or if it's in the other part, you need to actually put the thermostat in there and use some of that yellow gorilla snot or something to keep that thing in there, because if it falls out of place. When I was working at that gas station in 1974 or whenever it was, I put a thermostat in and the thermostat fell out of place and I broke the thermostat housing. Because it fell out of place and I tightened it up and it cracked, And but after, I learned that, never forgot it, in 40-something years. But you glue that thing, glue the gasket so it holds the thermostat where it's supposed to be. Now most of them now got this little rubber ring around the outside. And you shove them up in there to pretty well stay where they're supposed to be, but you got to make sure it doesn't move. Also, if there's a little bleed hole in that thermostat and it's going in there vertically, you need to put that bleed hole on the top, because when you're pouring your coolant in, it lets the air out. Now, if the thermostat's mounted this way, it don't matter where the bleed hole is, because it's always going to let it out. Now, you see that little bleed hole in the thermostat I'm talking about? It's on the flange part of it. It's a little hole that's usually got a little ball rattling around in there to let the air out. You'll see it. All right, this one here is machined deeper and bigger to accommodate the thermostat and servo gasket. This is what we had. The one we bought from the parts house looked like this. Absolutely would not go in there. He even put some, this weather strip adhesive on there I was talking about. And so we finally had to buy a thermostat from the GM dealer. It cost about $1 more than this one. And it came with a gasket that worked. Occasionally, when you got stuff from an aftermarket source, and I'm not trashing all the aftermarket stuff, but sometimes this aftermarket stuff is not quite built right. If you get stuff from China sometimes, like for example, power steering hoses. Some of the power steering hoses have got a joint in the middle of them. You know, power steering hoses have got to allow for movement of the engine. And so some of these have got it's metal that comes together and it's got a little hinge joint. It's got O-rings and all in there. You can get one of these Chinese made cheap power steering hoses and put them on something like a Jeep Cherokee or something. First time you turn the wheel to the lock, it blows that thing apart. Sprays the fluid everywhere. Or if you get a power steering pulley that you got to press on, it's too big, too little. It won't quite fit right, and you'll bust it. So what you got to do is get a little 2-rock brake cylinder hone and go clean it up a little bit so that it's still tight enough to do its job, but you won't bust anything trying to put it on there. So be careful about that. So anyway, that's the end of that. All right, I just want to give you guys a little few things that I sometimes forget. You got that?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody happy?
Mm-hmm.
All right. You learned something? Tell me something you learned. Mister, I'm almost through putting my cylinder heads on my 3-liter.
I
We're
am.
gonna hear that thing running today?
Huh?
We gonna hear it fire up today?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fired up and all that.
Well, what we're gonna have to do is work some more on your sister-in-law's car, the one with the bullet hole in the fender. We got that belt straightened out yesterday, except the belt they sent us was too short, but we put that tensioner on there. And putting that tensioner on there is not for the faint-hearted. Me and him worked together on that thing yesterday. Putting that tensioner on there was a stud and a monster. Well, somebody had, I think, Nick, you must have worked on it before. But anyway, that tensioner, whoever tried to put that other tensioner on there, couldn't get that top bolt tight.
They didn't have it in nowhere, like it was this much.
Well,
up.
it had worked its way out because the bottom one broke off. Bottom bolt popped off smooth. And I had to reach in there behind it and screw it with my hands and then screw that little piece of a bolt out and then find another bolt that would go in there and all that. And I
So
said,
it was a piece broke in there?
there was a bolt that was broke off up in there and all that. And I said, you know, I ought to get Nick to drill that out, you know.
And why you should have got Nick to drill it out?
Yeah, because it's your sister-in-law's car.
Well, you got the workers here. I'm working on my truck.
Anyway,
Y'all working on her car.
the point is we got that belt straightened out, but when she got in it, she also said sometimes when she puts it in drive, it don't want to go. What does that
Oh
sound like?
yeah, like it'll wait and then it like kick in.
What does that sound like? Low on fluid, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we're low on fluid on that. We need to look at the transmission, but it's skipping too.
Yeah, I heard that earlier.
A dead skip. And of course, we got that belt straightened out. It went blah, 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 bouncing around like it was. That was ugly, you know.
Yeah.
When we got that fixed, and I said, whatever. I told her, she agreed with me. I said, whatever happened, that's got to be fixed. Well, me and him, we got putting a belt back on it. The darn belt was about this much too short. You know, had we got on. So you always supposed to check that belt before you try to put it down in there. You know, he said, I can't get that thing done.
Yeah, man, was having difficulties. I said, man, yo, look, you finna have to get Mr. Richard to help you because, man,
Yeah.
I can't get this boat off.
Yeah. Well, we went in from the bottom.
I tried to come in from the bottom too.